This is an interview on the 15th of August 2010 with James Edward Flanagan, V40538, VX105397, Corporal, 39th Battalion, C Company, 15 Platoon. May I call you Jack?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Well, my first question is going to be, how did you join the Army?
Oh dear. There's no all I can think of that we're a group of young men and the war was in the background and we used to sort of discuss it over and of course I stood firm. No, I said, I'm not going. You know, I wasn't frightened or anything, but I knew that war is not right and it's still not right. But then they all joined up sort of one by one. So we got going again, which made two trips to New Guinea.
When you joined up, where were you living?
In, oh dear, it slipped me before I caught it.
And you were living with your parents?
Yeah, yes, I stayed with my parents until I got married.
And were you working at the time with your father?
Yes, at times, you know, he's offside.
And what was your job?
Bricklaying mainly he was a tradesman. And now I'm a clicker by trade.
And what's that?
You know all those little bits in your shoes sewn together? Well, I used to cut that pattern from the hide so that we sewed in and made a shoe. So they called us a clicker. We had a butte knife, you know, with a curved blade as it goes through.
When you first joined the Army, you would have joined the militia. And you were,
yes, you would have, wouldn't you?
You would have, were you based up at Seymour?
Yes, I think so.
Did you have much training?
No, not much. When you got there and found out, you know, well, if you know you wouldn't know the Bren gun.
Yes.
That's when I saw the first one, and from then on we had to learn how it worked and how to use it and all.
And when did you move across to the 39th Battalion?
At the very beginning, I was there, you know, in the first, when they called for volunteers.
So you volunteered?
I volunteered.
Did any of your mates go with you?
Oh yes, yeah.
Do you remember any of them?
Yeah, not by name.
But you all went across together?
And not by faith.
And how old were you at that time? You were one of the older ones that volunteered?
Yeah, I think 27, I think. Near enough.
So you would have been one of the old chaps?
Yeah, yes. I got the job.
And where were you camped when you first went into the 39th?
Well, that's a hard one. Because, you know, we always moves here and there.
I think it might have been at Darley.
It might have been too.
And so why did you join up? Did you feel as though you just had to support your mates, or did you really feel Australia was going to be under threat?
And I had a little boy. And have you ever read of Sapamero's work? He wrote The Fuzzy of the Angels. And we got to like one another. But he thought, yes, he wanted to write a poem, you know, on the things that were happening. And he got down once and he worked it out, all the verses and all that, made them others of Australia. And when they mentioned war, think of the Lord who's Saviour. It was great, really, you know. But they didn't sort of rush into it. They were very, very careful. That was the beginning.
Did you remember going on a street parade in Melbourne?
Oh yes, with fixed bonus. I didn't like that.
And how did you feel?
I suppose I feel funny, but I sort of didn't feel equal.
In what way?
There was a war on, and the cost of it, and then private life, you see, it didn't mix at all.
It didn't agree with your values.
No.
You were a Christian person.
And yet I knew the Lord gave the land and all that's in it. And I'm working on that now.
You were fighting your conscience.
Yes, that was right. And because I was scared, you know, going there.
You were fearful of going to war.
Yeah.
Do you remember going up to Sydney on the train and going aboard the ship, the Aquitania, that was going to take you to Port Moresby?
Yes, it was a lovely ship. I'd never seen a big ship like that before. We all pulled in.
Do you remember anything about the trip over?
Yeah, I was trying to find the mess hut at meal time. It was all in the wrong spot. But I gradually got there.
And I think you had a nickname. What did the boys call you? Did you have a nickname? Bluestone?
Oh, yeah.
How did you get that?
Well, I used to work at the quarry, stone quarry.
Oh, yeah. Where was that?
In, where is it? Colic? Yeah, that's right.
That would have been hard work.
Yes, it was, and dusty.
And you did that before you came to Melbourne?
Yes. And it was the stone had come on a great big long tray and it'd move along and you'd go along and pick out the lime and put it in the bag. So we set away. And your poor fingers, they just wore out. But we had rubber clips just on them.
So you probably thought going into the army would have been easier than working at the quarry.
Yeah, well, I've never... I suppose I have thought of it, but...
Well, we'll go back to Port Moresby. Do you remember what it was like when you first arrived at the harbour at Port Moresby? Do you remember the boat actually landing, and do you remember the troops, and do you remember what it was like?
it was awful to be in such a turmoil of everyone going anywhere and nothing doing. And we finished up sleeping on the ground because the equipment hadn't arrived.
This was when you went out to the 7 Mile strip? You went out to the 7 Mile aerodrome?
Yes.
That was your first camp?
That was the first time.
And what was there?
I'm not sure. Probably the big ships would be there. But it was quite interesting, although you weren't so happy about it. But
Tell us about your camp. What was your camp like?
oh, well, we slept on the rocks for a start. But no promises.
Do you remember what food you ate?
Only bully beef and the biscuit. I've even forgotten the name of the biscuit. It's hard as rocks. And yet, or sometime after, must be nearly close to a move, you know, there's always mud up there. And here's this little bit of biscuit on, and I bent down and picked it up and ate it. That's how hungry we were.
You would have been grateful for every little morsel.
Oh yes.
Did you have a close friend then when you were?
Oh yes, we did.
Yes.
Very.
Do you remember any of their names?
Yes, you can't. They just won't fit. You've got to think about them first.
That's okay.
There was Don Daniels.
Yes.
He was one of them.
And you stayed friends?
Yes, I had.
And I believe, were you involved in his wedding?
Oh yes, that's right.
That would have been really good for you.
Told him he should get married.
You told him he should get married?
Yeah, and he didn't know what to do. Of course, we had to get all the things going. That before that could be. Anyway, he eventually got there.
What was the morale like amongst the troops at that time? The morale. How did they all feel?
It was mixed.
Did you know the Japanese were gradually heading south?
We might have too. I'm not sure about that.
And did you remember the bombing raids started at the 7 Mile strip? The Japanese planes would come in and bomb you every day. Do you remember that?
Yes. Not only once. At one time they came over the drone, of course, and we were on the drone to save the strip, if possible, and the bombers came, and we had 20 of them coming towards me like that. Oh, I began to feel cold, and anyway, I thought, you know, here you are and you've got to go, and they will come over, you see, and drop their bombs. So I just sat there and watched them when they come over, and almost overhead, and down came the bombs, but we were too far away.
It would have been pretty scary.
Oh, it was very, very close.
And did you then dig slip trenches?
No, I don't think so.
After a time you moved camp and you were moved to Bootless Bay.
Yes.
And it was wider at Bootless Bay. Being a Christian person, you decided that some of the boys might appreciate a church service.
That's right.
So tell us how you started that.
Well, see, we used to meet in groups, half a dozen or so. You see, and then the thought came, well, this way, they didn't have anything like a church service there. But we went and we sang, and I had to give the talk. So, and I think about 4 times we did it. They'd say, you know, so in Elgin, Sergeant Flanagan will be the leader.
So you led the church parade.
Yeah.
That was really good. And I'm sure they would have appreciated it too.
I think they did because, you know, the remarks you get. And once, when they have inspection of rifles, you just open the breech and you can see right down, and you had to put your arms out like that and put your thumb over the lace, and that reflected how clean the barrel was right through. You see? I thought, well, you could easily shoot someone if, you know, you didn't like him. But we got through all right. And I was doing that one day, and I just looked through the barrel, and I noticed the soldier hadn't shaved. Did I? Yes. So I said, well, calling him by name, I've forgotten his name now. I said, by 1300, I said, meet me shaved. See, well, I had to do it. See, because I caught him and I was a sergeant. So, anyway, we did that. And he turned up, and you know, about 4 years after that particular point, and I hadn't seen any of the boys for all that time, he come up to me and he said, do you remember the shave? He had to do about 5 days extra work.
And he'd always remembered that.
I said, well, then one day in the orders for the day, it had Sergeant Flanagan will conduct the service, a church service. I'd never done anything like this. And all the officers and the soldiers, I got through it all right. And then another couple of times I had the parade to do. Marching, you know, and the band, oh, it was great.
Do you remember getting letters from home while you're in New Guinea?
Yes, quite a few.
You had a girlfriend at this time?
No, I didn't have a girlfriend.
You just got letters from mum and dad and
Yes.
brothers and sisters?
Yes, and others from, you know, the groups we used to have. So,
And what did you do for entertainment?
not much.
Did you play cards or do anything like
Some
that?
of them did.
Mm.
But I find it difficult now too, because what they did, I hadn't any idea of what it was about. You know, like the card games.
Cards. You hadn't played cards before, so you didn't know how to join in.
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
It was hard. No, I didn't want to do it. It was the fact that I couldn't do it was a bit of a worry.
You must have been a very deep thinker.
Yes, I was.
About this time, the Japanese started heading further south. Did you know that you were going to be sent up the Kokoda Track to meet the Japanese?
No, they assured us when we joined up that we would not see frontline fighting.
Well, that would have come as a terrible shock to you.
Yes, but of course nothing we could do. We were on the boat then, going over.
So did you actually walk up to Kokoda? Did you walk up the track?
Oh yes, I walked it because there was no way of... there was no traffic at all there.
And what do you remember about the jungle?
They'd laugh at this, but I rather liked it as an artist, you know, would view a scene and I'd sort of work out what was doing. It was all so strange. Wherever we went, we had to walk and do as we were told.
And carry all your own equipment?
Oh yes. Yeah, a rifle and a bayonet and grenades and, you know, a band of shots.
Do you remember the first time you came into action on the track?
No, that's something I haven't thought about much till the first time.
Do you remember the battle for Kokoda?
Oh yes,
What was that like?
very hard and very frightening. And of course, a continual banging in the air all the time. Made a very bad noise.
Did you lose some good friends? Did you lose some good friends?
Yes. Some of the best.
You were pushed back then to Ishurava. Do you remember being dug in there at Ishurava?
Yes, slightly.
And there was another big battle at Ishurava that went for about 3 days. Did you remember that? Do you remember being at Ishurava?
Not sort of specially.
What about Colonel Honour? Do you remember Colonel Honour?
Oh yes, he's a great scout.
And what did the men think of him?
Oh, a little bit off, because he was, well, he sent us forward and the fight was on up there, but he'd be here, you see. Points like that you sort of pick up.
Did you get wounded in that particular campaign?
Yeah, that wasn't, it wasn't.
Do you remember getting sick? Did you ever get sick?
Oh yes. I had malaria a couple of times.
After Ishurava, the troops came back to Port Moresby.
Mm.
and a lot were sent to hospital, and the battalion was reinforced.
Yeah.
And then early December was sent back to Gona and Buna. Do you remember going back to Gona and Buna?
Slightly, I knew, that we were in back.
And how did you feel being sent back into action after what you'd already gone through?
We really felt pleased that, we were going back and not pulling out of the thing.
So by this stage, you felt you were doing your bit and you were having some success.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the conditions up at Gona and Buna? Do you remember the conditions when you got there, what it was like?
Slightly. It was lovely country. Of course, I could watch it and sketch the trees on imaginary paper.
And were you wounded there at Gona?
Yes, Gona was wounded on the... I've got a list somewhere of all those things with it.
But you weren't sent back, you had to stay. You wouldn't have been very happy about that.
Not really, it was a struggle, to keep... See, I couldn't do any right and left turns without upsetting myself. And...
At this time, were you leading a group of men? Were you in charge?
Yes, towards the end, of course, when I Major Sergeant of the work party would go out with 8 or 9 men, and he'd be sent to be the leader. And he'd sort of place the men in their positions and all that.
What did you think of the Japanese soldier?
I think he was a good soldier, but wrongly led.
That's a very good answer.
Yeah.
Did you fly back from Popondetta back to Port Moresby?
Yes, I think we did.
And then you would have come back to Australia for leave?
Mm-hmm. Once we got back to Australia, that was it, as far as we were concerned.
Did you come back to Melbourne on leave?
Yes.
And had you met your wife, Alva, by then? Had you met her?
Oh yes, we were going together. But I said, wait until we win this war. First things first.
How much leave did you have? You were in the army for 5 years.
Yes.
And how much leave did you have?
I think we had 2 lots. I think there were only 2 lots were over when we were on New Guinea that we had.
And how much were you paid?
Oh, don't ask me that.
Come on.
I don't know.
2 and 6 a day or something like that?
Oh, I think it'd be more than that. I must...
10 and 6 a day.
Hmm?
10 and 6 a day.
Yeah. But you didn't have time to think about what you weren't getting.
No. Did you send your money back home?
Yes. That's when it's the first, they sent it back for you.
There wouldn't have been much to spend it on in New Guinea anyway.
No, not much.
Mm-hmm. After leave, do you remember going back to the Atherton Tablelands?
Yes.
And what happened there?
We were put in our different places, you know. We had to hold that ground. So,
And were you there when the battalion was disbanded?
well, back home. Melbourne, I think.
And how did you feel when the battalion was disbanded?
Well, you can be glad and sorry at the same time. Glad that you know, they were out of it. Not the rest of the war, of course, although we were glad about that. And it wasn't too bad. But the day I had a work party, go out as leaders, you know, for the work party. And the officer came, and we were all around in a group, you know, not a safe one, not a stupid one, and the officer, another officer came down, and he said, "The war is over." It wasn't a word.
And how did you feel?
We felt done, I think. That was it. They'd gone through too much. That for that minute or two, they couldn't cope with it. But at the same time, there was joy building up that they had surrendered. And although we were very glad, you know, that it stopped, it wasn't that at all. It was, the war was finished. But not, I expected everyone to shout and run and do all sorts of things. But no.
They were just stunned.
Well, we were so worn out that you couldn't cope with the fact that it was over for you.
Well, it was a long part of your life, wasn't it? 5 years is a long time.
Oh yes, a long time.
And most of that you were overseas and away from your family.
So,
And when you did come back, you decided to get married.
I decided when the war was over, I'd get married then. Don't tell that.
And so how soon after you came home did you get married?
Well, to be a while, I think. I can't think of when we were married, but I've got it down in a book somewhere.
And you used to write to Elva?
Oh yes.
And she'd write back to you?
We had letters back and forth for the whole time I was in the army.
I suppose that kept you in touch and
Yes.
strengthened your
Well, she
resolve.
She came into the hut one day and she said, "I'd like to interrogate you about your experience. Do you mind?" And I said, no, I didn't mind, because the more we told about it, the
it's easier for you.
up
That's
in
right.
its true colours. So then since that time she's never left me. But she's nice, to tell you that.
And I'm going to go back a bit. When the battalion was disbanded, you were sent to the second battalion.
That's right.
And where were you sent? Back to New Guinea?
Oh, no, not...
Back to
Well, it
New
must have
Guinea?
been New Guinea, yes.
And how did you feel about that, knowing that you were going back?
Oh, we didn't like it. I didn't like it anyway, and a lot of the others didn't.
Yeah. And during this time you were made a sergeant?
Yes.
In the second? Tell us about that.
Well, unfortunately, the main man in it was killed. But I went up there and we were talking, and I told him, that what I was doing, and he was quite interested. And that's about all. That part of it was blocked because of, what happened.
Yes. Too painful to remember. Too painful to remember. And one of your jobs was to write to the next of kin.
Yes.
Did you do that because of your religious beliefs, or was it a part of your job as being a sergeant?
Part of the job of a sergeant.
That must have been difficult.
Oh, yes. I even visited one family that had lost their son, and not a very good way either, but just let them know that I was there. That's all you could do.
Did that give them some comfort?
I think it would,
I just want to go back. I believe you led a prayer service at Ishurava before the big battle. Do you remember that?
Yes, I read remember quite a bit of services in the front line, and they were just over there a bit, firing and then me trying to work. But we'd sing hymns, and we'd have a reading, and it worked because I've had replies, from some of the people.
I believe you called Ishurava the killing ground in no man's land.
Yes.
And then one of the readings you gave was from Romans 5:8-21. We shall be saved from wrath through him.
That's right. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through Jesus Christ our Lord. It's there, isn't it?
How did you come to select all these readings? Or were they just... Did you just...
They come from the Bible.
Did you pick them out? Or did you have them sent to you? Did you feel them getting sent to you?
I made them up, sort of.
You made them up?
Yeah. Now, I read the Bible quite a lot, and that's where you get them from.
And that's what helped you get to this great age?
Yes, that's right.
Good living and a good faith. Good living and a strong faith.
Yes, that's right.
I just want to go back. One of your good friends was John Shepherd.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember him?
I remember him.
And what was he like?
He was a great scout, quite a decent fellow. And he did a good job as
He was a sergeant?
No, he wasn't a sergeant, I don't think. He could have been afterwards, of course, but I don't think so.
And after the war, did you keep up your friendship?
Now and then.
You wrote letters?
Sometimes they'll come in here, one will come in here. He was there.
And do you remember Dick Secker?
Oh, yes. I remember Dick.
Did you get a close mateship with all your friends? Did you feel that strong bond that you'd been through the same things together?
Oh, yes.
And did you look after one another?
Yes.
Did you share your food? What food you had sometimes?
Yes.
Were there times that you were hungry?
Yes. A lot of times. As I told you the story about the biscuit in the mud.
Do you remember having any hot meals on the track?
No, couldn't say that.
And how did you sleep?
On stones was our bed.
And how did you sleep in the jungle?
Well, it wasn't too bad. I mean, when the time came you could have a sleep, you're so exhausted that you slept. That's all it was.
You just crawl up under a bush?
Wherever you were.
No. You never had tents or anything like that?
No, we had just a ground sheet.
How close did you get to the Japanese?
Talkative.
So you
Finding out news, you know, where they were.
could you see them?
Oh yes, they closest, you know, like you and I now, just talking away. And I often wondered, what was he thinking? He had a rifle too.
And how did you cope being a religious person where you might have to shoot them?
That's a very strong idea. There's no way out of that, because if you hesitated, you were gone. They'd get you.
Tell us about the Japanese tapping on their grenades. What did they used to do? The Japanese used to tap the grenades on the rifle butts. What was
start them off? And we'd know then to down, you know.
You'd know they were close and they were tapping ready to throw the grenades.
Yes, getting ready to.
Do you remember the worst conditions you were fighting in, where you were?
No, one serves the other, I think. You can't pick them out.
When you'd been on the track for 6 weeks, you'd lived in the same clothes for 6 weeks. What did it feel like when you came out and...
Wet and damp and smelly.
And your feet?
My feet were all scalded, all white round the ankles.
Because of the wet conditions and
Yes.
the mildew and mould?
We hadn't stopped, you see, we had to keep on going. I was going along one day with, you know, fighting uniform and all the ammunition packed, and I tripped on a stone and I went, they said, about 20 feet down before I could stop. So I had all my equipment with me and slid down. Oh, Japs, here I come.
When you finally came back to Melbourne and the war was all ended, were you discharged at Flemington, or were you discharged from the army?
Just discharged by letter, I think.
By letter? And how did you pick up your life? The pieces and start again?
Slowly, you know.
Did the war have an effect on you as a person? Did the war have an effect on you as a person?
And it's something will always be there now.
And what job did you go into after the war?
Yeah, I think I went into the shoe factory. Oh yes, one chap took me on pity on me. I couldn't find work. Who would? An old fellow like me. And I went there. And then he said, you know, if I could go to a school and I could have the job, but that was the answer.
I believe the army told you that you'd be too old to train.
Yes.
Because
it was a soft pedal for them, I think. Because it was, see, the right and left turns, you couldn't do them without wobbling.
Because of your...
Because if you're in the guard, you've got to be...
Because of your injury to your foot injury. What do you think it's important for the younger generation to remember about the New Guinea War?
I think it's most important. It should be in the back of their mind if they could stop it. As we know that's impossible. Yes, of course if they knew what war really is, there wouldn't be anyone volunteering to fight.
Well, you've certainly had a really busy, interesting life.
Oh, I did, yes.
And as well as your interest in the church and the preaching, you're also a wonderful cake decorator.
Oh.
So tell us how that started.
They put it too much on me.
And it's something you'd always enjoyed, as well as painting. You always enjoyed painting?
Oh, probably, yes.
And I believe at the age of 91, you were knitting for the old people.
Yes, but the trouble was we used to knit mats and things like that. It was getting too rough. The stitches used to drop when I looked afterwards. I had to give it up in there. They were too wobbly.
And how old were you when you started knitting?
Oh, quite early, because my sisters knitted, you see, and I followed them.
They're all great hobbies anyway.
Oh, the cushions, where's the cushion gone? Oh, yeah. I thought one day I'd make a cushion, because the girls were. This is what came out of it.
And how long have you had that?
Oh, years.
That's pretty clever.
I was quite pleased with it, really.
That's very clever.
It's when they, you know, they'd stamp the pattern on the material and you sewed around that.
Well, Jack, I think you're an inspiration, and
Good.
we've really enjoyed hearing your life story today. So on behalf of the 39th Battalion Association Historical Subcommittee, we want to thank you very much for your time and this really interesting interview.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it in the way that it could be enjoyed.
And it was wonderful hearing what you had to say, and we do appreciate it.
Good. Thank you. And thanks for having you here with me.